Ever felt like your world shattered in a single moment? That's exactly what happened to me. 3 years of love, trust, and everything I believed in came crashing down the night I caught my wife, Sara, in the ultimate betrayal. I thought we had it all: a harmonious marriage, a beautiful daughter, and a stable, happy life. But secrets have a way of surfacing. I'll take you through my journey from heartbreak to unexpected healing, the choices that define my revenge, and, yes, the satisfaction of finding myself again. Sometimes, the most painful endings can spark the most powerful beginnings. The discovery hit me like a train. Never in a million years did I imagine I'd be the main character in this kind of story. And yet, there I was at a company event meant for celebrating achievements and unwinding. I was simply looking for Sara, my wife, hoping we'd find each other in the crowd and laugh together. But something felt off when I saw her boss, William, slipping off to a quieter hallway. It was instinct, maybe, that urged me to follow. Funny how life's supposed high points can morph into a whole new reality within seconds, and not the kind you'd ever wish for. And there it was right in front of me, a scene that's burned into my mind. Sara and William, sharing an intimacy I thought she reserved only for me. In that moment, it felt like my world was stripped away in an instant. I stood there, feeling a strange mix of betrayal, disbelief, and a new ache I didn't even know could exist. How long had she been pursuing satisfaction elsewhere? There, in that dark corridor, my own life seemed like a puzzle missing pieces. I wondered, at what point did I lose my grip on what I thought was a perfect marriage? They didn't see me, thankfully. I don't know what I would have done if they had. Instead, I turned and walked out of the building, my heart pounding, trying to process what I'd just seen. My mind kept replaying the scene, over and over, almost like a cruel joke my own brain was playing on me. I felt like I was floating, detached, unable to fully grasp that this was now part of my reality. Each step away felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me, and I was just trying to hold on to some shred of dignity. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, each scene replaying in my mind as if refusing to let me escape it for even a moment. Every time I closed my eyes, the betrayal was there, staring back at me. It wasn't just anger or pain. It was a deep, gnawing emptiness that kept me wide awake, wondering how I'd ever find the strength to face her, or myself, after this. If anyone had asked me before that night, I'd have described my marriage to Sara as something out of a dream. We had what seemed like a perfect balance, effortlessly in sync, both of us leaning into our shared lives with mutual respect and genuine care. Our routines felt like a comforting rhythm, one where every day I looked forward to coming home to her, knowing we'd share stories, laugh, and find warmth in each other's company. People used to tell me how lucky I was, and I believed them. The intention was always there to cherish and grow this bond. Looking back now, it's almost surreal to think how happy I felt, how fully I invested myself in the life we'd built together. There was a level of satisfaction that felt rare, even special, and I couldn't imagine wanting anything else. I was secure in what we had, confident that we shared a connection deeper than most. It was this unshakable foundation, I thought, that gave us resilience. So when did that trust, that satisfaction, become hollow, or worse, just a one-sided belief on my part? We had shared so much, small moments and big milestones, quiet evenings and spontaneous adventures. Each day, I thought, was another brick in our solid foundation. There was something incredibly comforting in knowing she was the person I could always count on, the one who knew me best. And yet, the very strength of that belief now feels like the cruelest irony. I wanted to give her everything, and I'd assumed she felt the same. But apparently, there was another layer to her, one she kept hidden, one that didn't fit with the woman I knew. I can't help but wonder, was it all just in my head? Did I see things that weren't there? Or did I ignore signs because I wanted so desperately to believe in our connection? Even now, part of me clings to that image of us, happy, close, a team. Maybe there was truth in it, maybe not. It's a painful question, one that leaves me questioning every memory, every shared smile. That life, that love I thought we had, what was it really? After that night, it felt like a wall had sprung up between us, solid, cold, impossible to ignore. I couldn't look at her without feeling this ache, a reminder of everything I'd believed in but couldn't trust anymore. There were so many moments I wanted to talk, to ask her why, to demand answers. But each time, I'd freeze, unsure if I even wanted to hear her explanations. Instead, I found myself pulling away, creating my own distance to protect what was left of my pride. Strange how someone you thought you knew inside out can suddenly feel like a stranger. Day by day, our home became quieter, weighed down by this unspoken tension. I'd catch glimpses of her watching me, maybe even trying to reach out, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. How do you just move on from betrayal like that? She'd ask small things. Do you want coffee? Or how was your day? But even those questions felt hollow now. I'd respond in short, clipped answers, and the silence that followed seemed to say everything I couldn't. We were drifting apart, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to pull us back together. The funny part is, I kept hoping she'd realize the impact of what she did. Maybe I wanted her to feel the emptiness I felt, to understand the deep wound left by her actions. But each day that passed, it was like she was waiting for me to break the silence, to forgive her, or maybe to pretend everything was fine. My heart, though, wasn't ready. The pain was still too raw, and the satisfaction I once felt in our marriage had faded into something bitter, almost unrecognizable. I started wondering if it was even worth trying to bridge this chasm between us. I think part of me held on to the distance because it was easier than facing the truth. If I stayed quiet, if I kept myself emotionally guarded, then maybe I wouldn't have to fully accept what she'd done. But deep down, I knew that wasn't a real solution. The tension between us was growing, and sooner or later, something would have to give. As the days went by, the tension at home grew unbearable. It was Angel, our daughter, who finally pushed us into action. I could see the confusion in her eyes, the way she glanced between us, trying to make sense of why her once happy parents barely spoke. I couldn't bear the thought of her feeling the weight of our problems, so I suggested therapy. Not for me, not for Sara, but for Angel's sake. Maybe a part of me also hoped that somehow therapy might help me rediscover some intention to rebuild the trust that had shattered. The first session was awkward, to say the least. Sitting in that sterile room with Sara, speaking to a stranger about my life, my pain, it was harder than I'd imagined. The therapist kept things gentle, asking us about our relationship's foundations and the family routines we once shared with such joy. But every answer felt like a reminder of what we'd lost. I couldn't look at Sara without feeling that pang of betrayal, that deep-rooted bitterness. Yet, I stayed there, if only to hold on to some stability for Angel's sake. Over time, I noticed that our sessions started touching on things I hadn't fully realized I was holding on to: old resentments, feelings of inadequacy, doubts that had been buried. It wasn't just about Sara's betrayal anymore. It was also about how I'd shaped my whole life around this marriage, only to feel like it had been a house of cards. Therapy wasn't just peeling back the layers on her actions, but on my own expectations, my own sense of self-worth. And despite the discomfort, there was something strangely stimulating about finally confronting those things. Still, each session ended with a lingering question. Could I forgive her? Could I even imagine a future where we'd somehow move past this? The more we talked, the more I realized just how deep the wound was. Therapy was helping us understand each other in ways we'd never done before. Sure. But was that enough? After weeks of therapy, I felt like I was hitting a wall. I'd done everything I could to keep the family intact for Angel, but the spark I once had for Sara was gone. I wanted to feel alive again, to find satisfaction in new connections, in the freedom to explore who I was outside of this marriage. It wasn't an easy choice, but I started opening myself up to the idea of meeting new people. There was something about it that felt liberating, almost like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been dormant for too long. The first few outings were strange, almost surreal. I'd grown so used to being part of a we that the thought of just being me took some getting used to. But as I spoke to new people, I felt a shift, an excitement, a sense of possibility that I hadn't felt in ages. It wasn't about replacing Sara. It was about finding a new balance, reconnecting with my own intentions and desires. Each conversation brought a small reminder that I was more than the broken man her betrayal had left behind. I was rebuilding. Of course, there were moments of guilt, moments where I wondered if I was moving too quickly, if I was being fair to Angel. But then I'd remind myself, a happy, fulfilled father would be better for her than someone who was constantly weighed down by bitterness and resentment. I knew I deserved to feel whole again, to find joy, even if that meant moving in a new direction. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just a chance to breathe and feel something beyond the weight of the past few months. It's funny how, in letting go, I actually began to understand myself better. These experiences weren't just about meeting others. They were about reconnecting with the parts of me I'd forgotten. It felt like a new beginning, even if I was still uncertain about what that future might hold. And somehow, that uncertainty was part of the thrill. Eventually, the moment came when I couldn't ignore the inevitable anymore. Therapy, new experiences, even time, they hadn't healed the core wound, and I knew deep down that staying together would only prolong the pain for us both. So, I brought up the topic of divorce. Saying it out loud felt both heavy and strangely freeing, as though I was finally taking control of my own life again. I explained to Sara that this was about moving forward, not just for me, but for both of us. The intention was clear. We needed to let each other go. Surprisingly, Sara didn't argue. She listened quietly, nodding as though she'd known this was coming all along. When the divorce papers were signed, the finality of it all hit me. This was it, the end of everything we'd once built. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Despite everything, we'd shared years together, built a family, created memories that would last a lifetime. And yet, here we were signing it all away. A part of me mourned, not just for the marriage, but for the dreams that came with it. The day she moved out was painfully quiet. Boxes packed, a few silent goodbyes, and just like that, the life we once shared was over. Angel tried to stay strong, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. It wasn't easy knowing that my choice, my need for independence, was changing her world too. Still, I reminded myself that this was a step toward stability, a chance for both Sara and me to find peace, even if it meant going our separate ways. There was no satisfaction in the split, only a quiet acceptance. And so, life settled into a new rhythm. I began to feel the weight lifting, though the echoes of what once was lingered. Friends and family reached out, some supportive, others surprised, and I learned to navigate this new identity as a single father. The divorce, while final, wasn't an ending but a beginning, a strange mix of relief and sadness that left me hopeful and yet uncertain. The journey was far from over, but at least now, it was mine to shape. After the divorce, Sara's life seemed to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without the familiar structure of our marriage, she appeared lost. From a distance, I could see the toll it was taking on her. There was a tiredness in her face, a heaviness in her posture. I'd hear from mutual friends that she was struggling with the silence, the emptiness left in our home. There were no angry words between us, no blame at this point. It was simply the reality of our choices. And while I wanted to move on, I couldn't ignore the effect it was having on her. Even now, there's a part of me that wishes things had been different. I wouldn't say I felt satisfaction in her struggle, but there was a sense of justice, maybe in seeing the impact of her decisions. The life she'd once built, the comfort she'd known, it all felt as fragile as it had for me on the night of the betrayal. Sara had always been strong, the kind of person who could face any challenge, but now it seemed that strength was slipping. And in some strange way, watching her struggle made me reflect even more on my own choices. Our paths barely crossed anymore, but whenever I heard about her difficulties, I felt a strange blend of sympathy and detachment. She was living alone now, far from the familiar world we'd created together. I knew that this solitude must weigh on her, especially with Angel spending most of her time with me. I hoped for her sake that she'd find a way to move forward, to rebuild her life. But I couldn't be the one to guide her through it. that was something she had to do on her own. My intention now was simply to focus on the future. The reality of separation had shown us both the consequences of broken trust. I'd found my path, however challenging, yet Sara seemed to be struggling to find hers. It was a reminder that every choice, every decision, had repercussions. In a way, watching her journey now felt like a closing chapter, a way to finally let go of any lingering resentment. Whatever came next for both of us was a fresh start, shaped by everything we'd learned along the way. As time passed, I noticed a quiet determination growing in Angel. She'd been through so much, watching her family fall apart, trying to understand feelings that were far beyond her years. I could see her processing it all, turning the pain and confusion into something meaningful. One evening, she told me she wanted to study psychology. At first, I wasn't sure how serious she was, but the more she spoke, the more I realized her intentions were sincere. She wanted to help people find balance, especially those facing emotional turmoil like what she'd experienced with us. There was a spark in her eyes when she talked about it, an eagerness I hadn't seen before. Angel was resilient, and I felt a deep sense of pride watching her channel everything she'd endured into something positive. She'd seen firsthand the impact of broken trust, the emptiness betrayal could create, and she wanted to be there for others going through similar struggles. She was determined, almost inspired, to provide the guidance she wished we'd had during those difficult times. Her path was becoming clearer, one filled with purpose and a sense of satisfaction in giving back. Angel would occasionally ask me questions about relationships, trust, and how people heal. I answered as best I could, sharing what little wisdom I'd gained, though I knew her journey was uniquely her own. The experience had shaped her, yes, but it hadn't broken her. Watching her turn those painful memories into motivation was both humbling and heartwarming. I realized she was finding her way, and in some way, she'd gained strength from what we'd been through. Her compassion grew stronger, and with it, her resolve to make a difference. In many ways, Angel's journey became a source of healing for me, too. Seeing her focus on helping others reminded me that, despite the pain, something good had come out of our struggles. She was creating a future where she'd use her own experiences to lift others, to bring understanding and support to those in crisis. It was her way of taking control of her life, a path forward filled with intention and empathy. And just knowing that she was finding peace in her own way helped me finally start to find mine.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.